Okay, so we're getting into, I want to get into very common orchid that you see everywhere. It's called the Phalaenopsis. So I think the getting into the learning about orchids, I think everybody should learn how to pronunciate the name of the orchid. It's called the Phalaenopsis. Okay, so Phal for short. So if you say I have got a couple of Phal, then I would know which one you're talking about. Okay, so back to the history of the Phalaenopsis, that is, say about 10-15 years ago, so we had the explosion of the orchids. Now you see orchids everywhere, just about any store, even Lucky, Safeway, Home Depot, Walmart, Costco, you name it, just everywhere. So one of the things that happened was that they perfected how to propagate these orchids and can grow very short period of the time and cost effectively. Usually the orchids from when you pollinate them and become a seed, and then it produces a seed pod. From the seed pod, when it's mature, and then you put it in, let's say the seeds will getting into the ground as an example, and then sprout, germinate and sprout and grow, and then going into the get to bloom. Usually for typical orchids takes about 5 years. Okay, so once you get pollinated from the seed pod, about 7 to 9 months, and some of them takes about a year, and then after that put in an agar, just artificial, with all the nutrient into the flask, and then just pour the sprinkle those seeds, and then from that point on, germination takes about a couple months, some of them takes a few months, and then from that point on, growing it, once you grown into and then once you put the seed in the flask, we seal it. Okay, it creates its own greenhouse, their own, and then they grow. When they grow into fill up the flask, and they break the flask, and then take them out, and then what we call the compost, we put in a community pot, and then from that point on, it start grow, and then they will take another about 2 to 3 years until it bloom. So the Phalaenopsis used to be about good $45 to $65 with a bunch of flowers on them, couple spikes, and it could cost as much as $100. But because of the propagation technique has developed, and from the day the propagation to blooming, it takes only 1 year to 1.5 years. So it shortened the time by about 300%. It's about 3 times faster to grow. So then what happens is then the cost went down dramatically, and then can produce as much as you want. So that's the benefit of it. We get to see the orchids everywhere, and then short periods of time. And then also timing was that now the orchids are available any time of the year. So that's another thing I want to talk about, the manipulation on how to initiate the spiking to bloom as well. So the population of the orchid was good and bad. Good, now the orchids are very popular, very affordable. You can buy really big orchids for Phalaenopsis for under $20, and then the flower lasts about 3, 4, as long as about 6 months. So it is good for the general public. So it became very affordable, so anybody can buy it. But the bad part was that because of so popular, now it became a disposable item. So when the flower finish, done, toss it, oh, it's dead. Is it really? Okay, flower finished? Not really, but a lot of people thinking the flower is finished and then done and then toss it, go get another one. Some of them nowadays are under $10. So then it really depreciated the value of the orchid as far as I can see it, because there's no much of the appreciation of the orchid. There's no mystic about the orchids as far as I see it. And then on top of that, in general public thinking that Phalaenopsis, the only orchids are out there is available. Is it? In the beginning, as I said, there are about 25 to 30,000 species and over 250,000 hybrids to choose from. But unfortunately, general public exposed to only one kind, that is Phalaenopsis. So it's good and bad. So we always have an argument for that. But anyway, as I said, the orchids do not have any life expectancy, and you can grow these orchids for as long as you want. Okay. So as an example, this basket was given to me about 4 years ago. Okay. And they just dropped it off, say, hey, I don't want this orchid. Song, you take care of it. But it has some story behind it. So, okay, so then I will take care of it. So then this has been grown. As you can see, the large plant, it's been grown, but it's been, 4 years? And it started to shooting out the spikes right now. And these are, 3 of them are very identical. Why? Again, is from the propagation technique. So then every single one of them came out of one plant. They are exactly the same. They behave the same. And then again, you can see it's blooming same time. This is about fourth time it's been blooming. So it's been sitting on by the windowsill all this time. I haven't moved it, and it's been growing. So again, if you can take care of it, if you find the right spot for it, it will grow and grow and grow and bloom after bloom after bloom. Okay, so that's one good part of it. Now, most of the Phalaenopsis bloom once a year. Okay, some other orchids are bloom multiple times. Some are bloom. I should say, the orchids variety of blooming is, a vast variety of it, one extreme to the other. As an example, the Phalaenopsis, it takes whole year, and then the bloom flower lasts only about 2 to 3 days, but it's spectacular. It's worth it. But unfortunately, only 2-3 days. Some of the blooms are consecutive bloomers, which is one spike comes out, one bloom opens up, and they fade. Next one open up. They continuously. Some of them last another 2, 3, 4 months, and some of them just bloom straight 8 to 10 months. So the variety of an orchid, endless. So back to the Phalaenopsis, they bloom only once a year, and that is the temperature. It triggers to giving them a signal to bloom, which is about November. The summertime on it stays. I'm talking about this around this area, Northern California, that it's about 60s, 70s during the daytime, and then November come around, the temperature drops at nighttime to about 50s and below. So that few days or week or so it continues, then plant will get a signal, oh, there's a difference in temperature, it's time to bloom. Then it kicks in the blooming signal, and then it starts shooting out the spikes. So then it's going to take about 2-3 months to completely show the spikes coming up, and then it sets the bud and opening up, and by say March or April will be a full bloom. Now, because of we understand how the orchids bloom, so then artificially we can initiate or we can control the blooming season. So again, if you have a warehouse about tens of thousands of orchids, so then we want to ship this one in bloom January, February, March, April, May, June, and so on. So then January shipping, or let's say back then about 4 or 5 months prior to that, just lower the temperature in the room down to about 50, somewhere around there, and then it kicks in, and then move it on to the next one, and then 90% more than most of the orchids will start spiking according to that temperature control. Now, same as cymbidiums, as you know, they're outside, easy to grow, very hardy, they are hard to kill. Okay, those are the ones same way when same time like a Phalaenopsis, that when the November come around, the temperature drops, and then the spikes start kicking in, and then the spike will start grow throughout the whole winter, and then by February, March, and you start seeing these buds and the blooms, and by May, around Mother's Day is a peak. Okay, so if you bring the cymbidiums inside when it's too cold, they worry about it getting too cold, then you would not get that temperature difference as a signal, and then it will never bloom. But again, cymbidium's a hardy plant. You just sit out there, never complain. Even though you don't repot about 10-15 years, they just grow, and grow. So that's the part of it. So that's how we can, so knowing that the temperature control, then we can see when it's gonna be bloom, so we can pretty much predict what it's gonna do. So as I can see, all the flowers, the orchids are sitting on this table, just about all of them has spikes on about inch or so. It started growing, so which is about November, December, and just preparing in December, and then now start spiking. Okay, so now one other thing is that about the blooming. Okay, why the Mother Nature or the flowers bloom? What is the purpose of the blooming? Is that try to make us? Are they try to please us, giving us beautiful flowers? The real reason is that it's a regeneration, reproduction of that plant. So having the seed will set the seed, and the seed will plant it and then recycle. So whole reproduction will goes on and on and on. There's two times that is this orchids bloom. Two setting or occasion. When is regular cycle, just like it is now, plants are good, and then when the time got the signal, and then it bloom. Second occasion is before they die. All right. So the plant knows they are going downhill, and then as a Mother Nature, what do you have to do? You have to set the seed. So in order to set the seed, what do you have to do? You have to bloom. And then hopefully by blooming it, get pollinated, and then set the seed, and then leave the seed for the next generation for another survival. So people just bring the orchid to me, or they telling me that, oh, it's blooming. Okay, but when I look at the plant, they're dying. Okay, the leaves are all shriveled up. There's hardly any roots on it, and then but it shoot out the spike, and then it's about to bloom. Probably those blooms are not that spectacular, just a puny little flower and bloom. But for the people, most people, they're excited because of it bloomed. Again, it's gonna die. right? So that's the distinction of it. But we want the plant to be healthy, and then when they're healthy, then it will start shooting out the spike and the bloom. That's a good cycle. Now, second of all, the length of the blooming. This Phalaenopsis blooms about minimum 2 months, as long as 3 months, and I've seen 6 months. That's about a half of the year. Now, if I put it in, being in flowering form, it's like being pregnant, okay? So where I'm going is that if the plant is healthy, and then they are putting all the energy into support the bloom. If the bloom stays sustained for the long period of time, it starts to exhaust and depleting all the energy from the body. Okay? So what I usually do when the flower is about 2/3 done, then I cut the spike and then put the flower in the vase, and that's going to last another couple more weeks. But what it does is it will give a chance to recover a lot faster for the plant for the next cycle. Otherwise, plant is, by the time you finish it 6 months later, plant is exhausted. Okay? If you know how to take care of it, that's fine. You can just rejuvenate it, give them a help, give a hand, and give us some nutrition, and they will recover. But without knowing all those know-how, having the flower last that long, and more than likely, the orchid is gonna die. Does that make sense? So there's a lot of ins and outs of it, so we're gonna talk about that as the time goes by. And then also today, one other thing, there is roots. The first part that I want to talk about is about the roots. I'm going to start from the bottom up. Okay. Now, the roots are very, very important. That by looking at the roots, it's going to tell me what the condition of their plant. After the flowering, the roots coming out a lot smaller and skinnier. But when their plants are healthy, it throws out thick, nice, robust roots that shoot out. The bigger the root system, better the plant, and then it's going to give a better leaf. The leaves are bigger, then next thing you know, the bloom is going to be much, much better.